What's up everyone, this is the JRPG Beast back with another video for y'all. So today we're going to be taking a look at all the new Final Fantasy VII news that was released today during the State of Play and randomly elsewhere. So first off, we get the upgrades for the PlayStation 5 for Final Fantasy VII, which I think just look fantastic. I don't have a PlayStation 5 currently, but really making me consider just going out and making that purchase as soon as I can actually find one, you know. Just looking at the 4K resolution is good. It's great. It's whatever. I have a monitor to do that with, but really I think the thing that's more appealing is the locking it at 60 FPS. I think that's something that could be super interesting. I played it just on an old base PlayStation 4, so kind of getting that up to 60 FPS could be super interesting, so that'll be fun to see. And then we see some of the, you know, like the textures upgrading, the lighting effects, all that's great. I thought the game was beautiful as it was, so that doesn't necessarily like super appeal to me, though I know there are plenty of people that that's probably a really, really huge deal for. So I'm super happy for all that. And then obviously the big one is Intergrade, which is Yuffie DLC. Kind of out of nowhere. I know a lot of people were speculating about potential DLC. We even talked about it here on the channel, about the prospects of possibly like some Sephiroth type DLC, or maybe Zack DLC or anything like that, but Yuffie, which I think is super interesting. As we see in the footage, it's time frame wise, it's right around whenever Cloud drops through in meets Aerith in the church, because we see a little bit with Barrett and Tifa talking about, you know, they lost Cloud along the way, yada yada yada, and that's kind of where we see Yuffie. So it'll probably be a little bit before that, going through at least through the plate collapsing, because we did see a conversation about that, which leads me to believe, and this is kind of a going back on my who saved Biggs theory, it has to be Yuffie, right? Or Yuffie and this new Avalanche guy that she's partnered up with, which is really interesting. So he's a spear guy. While I don't think he's at all related to anyone that we've seen before, he does kind of bear some semblance to Angel, going back to Crisis Core, which there's a lot to cover with that as well. So that's really interesting. So he's a spear guy. I think more than anything what this DLC is this is about as good of a sneak peek as we're going to get into a Remake Part 2 is going to be. Some of the changes that they make. I'll have to go back and like really, I mean, I don't need to go back super far, but there was definitely some type of tag team attacks going on with Yuffie and the Spear Guy. I'm just going to call him Spear Guy because I don't remember his name and I don't really want to take the time to go look it up. But Yuffie and Spear Guy, there was some tag team attacks. We saw him spin Yuffie around on a spear and launch her. And then we also saw him, you know, shoot Yuffie up in the air off of his spear as like almost like a catapult. Now, the launching her up like a catapult looked more as if it was more of a cinematic, similar to when Barrett did that to Tifa when you're fighting the mutant guys down in the underground and all that. So that could potentially be that, but I definitely saw him swing her around on the spear and then send her flying. So that's something that's incredibly interesting. We also saw some more aerial combat from Yuffie, which I think is really nice. We saw her jumping up and attacking. Aerial combat, for those of you who played Final Fantasy VII Remake, it's pretty terrible, particularly with like Cloud and Tifa. You know, Barrett did fine, obviously, but he doesn't have to jump in the air and go hit people. Yuffie did. We also get to see Yuffie interact in the environment a little bit, which was using a lot of the same similar environments that we saw in Final Fantasy VII, in particular right there around Sector 5 slums and everything like that. We also saw her using some of her weapons out in the field to break boxes that were far away. Not dissimilar to what Barrett was doing in his playthrough section with his gun arm. So that's really interesting to see. Obviously, like I said, the real big highlight, or whatever we want to call it, is the potential for tag team type attacks. That's something that I know a lot of people like theorized up until the release of Final Fantasy VII. Would that be an inclusion or not? Obviously, it wasn't in the core game, but that looks like that's definitely a possibility now in, you know, this DLC, which leads me to believe this DLC is just a testing ground for what to look forward to in Part 2. The other question is, are we going to get further down the line more DLC? This DLC is releasing in June, which is more than a year past whenever Remake Original came out. So could we see something similar to what they did with Final Fantasy 15, where they release these individual little chapters and stuff? That could be really interesting. I'm not saying they are going to do that, but it'd be really cool to see. I think I ultimately would still like just an actual Final Fantasy 7 Remake Part 2 and whatever they're going to do with that. I think I'd still prefer that. But if they can pepper in some of these little side content stuff with DLC, I'm okay with that. As long as they keep the DLC price reasonable. I don't want, like, you know, $50 DLC just to play as Yuffie. I like Yuffie. I think Yuffie's dope. But, you know, I think this also goes into, I know there was some speculation, would Yuffie be an optional character? Would she be mandatory character? So on and so forth. If they're putting her in a DLC where she's fully controllable, she's going to ultimately be just like a main character that you'll be able to find throughout the course of the story. Tying her in with Avalanche and Wutai, I think, is super interesting as well. Obviously, she's connected to Wutai, but going back to the Who Saved Biggs, it has to be Yuffie. I think that fixes everything, because there's a whole conversation about the plate falling and how they don't want to get involved. And I don't think Yuffie's going to be that person that's going to allow that to happen. She's probably going to come in the aftermath, and she's going to scoop up Biggs, and there you go. I was speculating maybe Kate Shee or somebody like that, but I think it makes way more sense now seeing this, that it's Yuffie. Yuffie's going to be the one that saves Biggs, which I'm okay for. I know obviously Yuffie wasn't in Midgar in the original, and yada 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 yada. I understand it. Go play the original if that's really what you want. I'm fine with them experimenting and doing type of different things. Moving on past that, we got the answers to First Soldier and Ever Crisis. One of these is not like the other. One of these is actually interesting. One of these is not. First Soldier, I think, is one of the more disappointing announcements. It is, I believe it's a phone game. Maybe not. But it is some battle royale first-person shooter type game. I don't care. I think time frame-wise, they said it was based 30 years before Final Fantasy VII. Or maybe before Crisis. But it's 30 years in the past. And looks like you're traveling around Midgar, probably some different areas. I'd imagine it's probably not further than Midgar, because they probably want to reuse a lot of those assets that they can, and it's some type of FPS type game, which I don't care. This just looks like a cash grab, which whatever, make your money, do what you need to do. I'm probably not going to be interested. That's definitely one I'm going to read a wiki on to get the information if there are any plot relevant details. The other one, Ever Crisis, which was something else we speculated, potentially maybe this could be the name of Part 2, or this could be the name for some Zack-only DLC, or anything like that. Nope. It is a Final Fantasy VII Compilation remake for iPhones and Android. It has a really cool art style, I think. My only concern, and it was somewhat prevalent in the trailer that they showed, they're changing some dialogue. There's also some things that are not happening in the correct order. I specifically saw during the Guard Scorpion or the Sentinel Scorpion fight, Aerith in the team. I don't know what that's about. It's supposed to be episodic. So maybe it's just because they did show clips of stuff that was clearly before Crisis. It's Zack going along the train from the beginning of Crisis Core. And so if we start like with before Crisis maybe, and then like work our way up, and then so by the time you get to, part 1 of Final Fantasy VII OG, you're already somewhat leveled up and everything like that. I don't know how they're going to do that. That's not coming out till 2022, so we've got plenty of time to kind of speculate and everything like that. Another thing that they showed, fighting the Scorpion, you had access to Ifrit and Leviathan. Again, I don't know how they're doing that. One of the dialogue options that was very specifically changed whenever Jesse and Biggs are talking about who Cloud is at the very beginning as they're cracking the code to get in. Jesse brings up about Cloud being ex-soldier versus Biggs being the one that says Cloud being ex-soldier. So they are changing some dialogue too. My concern is that becomes confusing as you get into Remake. Obviously, they're kind of labeling as it's its own thing, which again is just really weird to me. Some of the cool aspects, though, is that they did say that this is going to cover all the compilation. So that includes Advent Children. That includes Dirge of Cerberus, the game no one wants to talk about, and obviously Before Crisis, which would be really cool because we've not really gotten any Before Crisis content, stateside, actual. There's a lot of really interesting things going on. Oh, and before I forget, continuing on that Dirge of Cerberus thing, Yuffie is in her same Moogle outfit, which is super cool. B, there was definitely a Dirge of Cerberus like cameo, like little surprise, little like mid credit, whatever you want to call it, post credit, whatever you want to bit. That was totally Dirge of Cerberus, and that kind of was Nero. I can't even remember the guy's name at the moment. I think it was Nero, but no, maybe not. With the big bad, not the big bad, but the deep ground guy. The deep ground guy. That's all I can come up with right now. I try to forget Dirge of Cerberus as much as possible, but that was definitely him. 110%. So he's alive and he's doing things. We also see whenever Yuffie's attacking or getting attacked by some soldiers that look definitely deep ground-esque. So, for any speculation, is Dirge of Cerberus going to be a thing? Is it going to be around? Yeah, it's canon. It's somewhere in the Final Fantasy VII Remake, whatever version of the multiverse or universe, whatever we want to call it, or remake. Dirge of Cerberus, some of those events are at least going to be used, which I like and I don't like. If they go too deep down that rabbit hole, I'm cautiously optimistic. Maybe they just keep that kind of stuff to DLC type content, so it's not part of the main story. That what I would be okay with. Just keep Genesis and Gact far away from my Final Fantasy VII. Just go away. I don't need any of that. No one wants that. Which would make more sense if they kept him away, for licensing and everything with Gact, but whatever. But anyway, that's all the news that came out today. It all came out while I was in class and at school today, and so I didn't get to really get a whole lot of it here until recently, so really exciting stuff. I'm glad they're continuing with Final Fantasy VII Remake before we just instantly drop into part 2. I'm glad to see these little bits of things. Ultimately, I think Ever Crisis is to get everyone that hasn't anyone that hasn't played any of the compilation all on the same page with storylines, because there's going to be a lot of weird shit that's going to happen. I can already guarantee part 2 is going to be weird, and we're going to get into weird shit territory, which, you earn my respect and you earn my trust after Final Fantasy VII Remake, so I'll go along on the ride with you. But anyway, guys, that's it, and we will see y'all next time.